All right.
Nice.
And we are live. Yeah. Feeling
Dude,
kind of
second
sick
time.
today. I'm feeling a little bit sick, so hopefully I don't have to talk too much or whatever. My head is also super foggy. I just got back from Disney World, and that is why I'm sick, because I was around a million people and then in airports, and now I'm home. And so picking up shit. Obviously did not get COVID, thankfully, but yeah. Welcome again, Mark. So happy to have you on the channel. And today we are talking about The Last of Us. So if you didn't catch that last week, we covered episodes it was 2 weeks ago, because
Yeah.
we were both on vacation last week. I was at Disney World, and Mark, where were you again?
I was in Costa
Punta
Rica
Cana?
celebrating
Costa.
a friend's bachelor party. Yeah, it was a good time. I also
Nice,
got a
nice.
little sick, but I'm feeling better now. Towards the tail end of the trip, but yeah, it was a blast, man. I'm glad to be back, but that's kind of why we're doing 2 episodes today instead of one.
Yep.
But correct me if I'm
Or
wrong here, but we've got
or
one after
6.
this, right?
Yeah, we have one more. We have a big
Okay.
finale after this, and then we
That'll be
had
good.
our last episode, because we started this way late in the game. Like we didn't even start talking about this shit until like we were halfway through the season, and then we were like, oh, we should do a show on this. Yeah, there you go. So we covered the first 6 episodes, I think it was, in our last live stream, which is up on the channel if you want to go check that out. Maybe I can leave a link to it in the description. But cool, let's get into it. So I think the first episode we need to talk about is episode 7, which is Ellie and her experience, and it's kind of that flashback episode where we see her in school and like meeting her best friend Shiley, I believe was her name, right?
Riley. Yeah.
So yeah, lots of thoughts there. Again, for context, if this is your first time watching this live stream, I have not played the game. Mark has played the game, and that is kind of the whole shtick of this thing. It's like I give my like unfiltered thoughts, and then he kind of comes in and weighs it down with like posterity and like hindsight on the game. But I will say, okay, so on this episode, right? I can't remember if it has an official title or not, but the episode with Ellie talking about, or not talking about, but Ellie revisiting her past experience being a teenager in school, with her friend Shiley. The first thing that I noticed was kind of the choices that are present at the beginning, middle, and end of the episode, right? So the first choice that she is presented with, in the beginning of the flashback, is when she is talking to her officer after she gets into like a fight in gym class. And then the officer is like, you can be a grunt or you can be an officer. Now there's that choice, and we'll get into the other 2 choices in a second. But that first choice, personally, like I don't know what your experience is, Mark, but like I grew up in a military family, and he is just like the opposite of what your military family tells you like an officer should
Mm.
be, right? Like he celebrates the little luxuries. He's like, you'll get a warm bed, you'll get good food, like you'll have the grunts do the shit work, and like you get to be a leader. And I'm like, that's actually bullshit, right? Because like in the military family that I grew up in, it's like all captains and uh, uh, colonels and that kind of shit, and everyone is just like, no, like if you're gonna get a nice meal, you're like your crew needs a nice meal too. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of shit that like I was raised on, is like the captain eats last kind of thing. And so when this guy's coming in and extolling these virtues of like being an officer and talking about how great it is, I personally felt like that's not like what an officer should be. And I think I got a little bit of that from like Ellie and her kind of like retort. She was like, okay, I'll be a fucking officer. Like, can we go now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like she kind of saw through the bullshit. But yeah, did you have any takes on like that part of the episode, sort of the upfront?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really interesting how he basically talks about, again, we've seen this a few times now, but he sees himself, or Fedra specifically, as the only ones that are holding everything together. You know, they took power. They're technically the most powerful unit now after the infection started and everything. And they're like basically the last line of defense against any adversary. But I think you're right. The actual, I guess, the way he identifies this structure, where okay, if you do XYZ, you're gonna have a safe life. Maybe that's what is more important now. If you think about kind of pre-infection era, what are they called, cordyceps?
Yeah.
Everything was, rise in the ranks, succeed, make money, become powerful. Now it's just be safe, have security. So maybe that's the most important thing that they have. And so he's like, all right, well, how am I going to incentivize her to actually stay and be a part of this unit that we've created, this safety net that we have, where, I mean, obviously they need her as much as she needs them. They need bodies, they need people to be doing this stuff. Riley has been, we're skipping a little bit ahead here, but Riley has been given a much lower tier job as she's seen it. So there's need for that too. But
wait, sorry, 1 second. Which one was Riley? I'm trying to remember.
Riley's the girl. I think you said Shiley or something. That's her name.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
it's Riley. I thought it was
yeah.
Shiley. Huh.
I may need to double check just to be sure, but yeah.
Well,
sure.
it's probably my fuck up. I'm a dumb fuck. But that is
sick, man. It's all good.
But that is interesting because that gets into kind of a larger theme that I saw is like, okay, it's interesting that Ellie is given these choices, and in these moments where Ellie has a choice, her friend, I'm just gonna call her friend because I don't want to be like saying Shiley or saying Riley the whole episode and being wrong, and someone's gonna get fucking pissed off. But what's interesting is that Ellie has all these choices and her friend doesn't. And when I see that, I think about that and I'm like, holy shit. Like there's commentary here. I think a bit about white privilege as well. And that's where I'm kind of curious, like, was her friend, was she also like a person of color in the game?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So, and was it a similar thing where like her friend didn't have as many options as she did?
Well, that's a good question. Is it the I don't know how best to say this. Is it the do you think that you have these options, or is Ellie just really good at making options kind of appear or occur? Because I think what you're trying to get at as well is there's a few options, the black and white, A or B, that's it. And Captain Kwan, I think was his name, the captain that's talking to her in the beginning. He's saying either you have the option of going this route, the smart route of safe, secure, captain, whatever, cushy lifestyle, or you can go the path that you're going and you'll be nothing. And then you're going to have to work hard and shovel the crap or whatever else. So in most people's minds, there's A or B. I guess for Riley, it's either do this remedial job that she's been granted because now she's old enough to actually be, given a job, or do you go the route of the other option, the only other option, which is the resistance, aka the Fireflies. So to her, that's it. Though there are no other options, and we kind of see that because she's made the choice and she's going that path. With Ellie, again, you kind of alluded at it. She looks for other options, that hidden path that maybe isn't as accessible to other people or isn't as visible.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that what you're getting at too there is that like Ellie she makes her own options, and we see that kind of come through at the end, especially because the other two times that she is given a choice A and a choice B are later throughout the episode, right? The second time, I believe, is when her friend is like, you can stay with Fedra or you can leave and become a Firefly with me, and come to Atlanta, right? I think that's the second time she gets like an option A or an option B.
Mm-hmm.
And in that decision, one thing that they do a really good job of highlighting is like Ellie and her best friend would have become complete enemies and would have had to kill each other if that had been the path that they had followed, right? If Ellie had chosen to become this officer and her friend had chosen to become a Firefly or whatever, they would never have, it never would have worked out. They would have had to kill each other because that's just the nature of the dynamics of the political situation. And then obviously Ellie doesn't go down that path. And then you get to the end of the episode where Ellie has to choose like leave Joel behind or like stay, and like watch him die. And she chooses, no, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find medicine and I'm going to fight until there's nothing left to fight for. And so I think what she does that helps her succeed, kind of to your point, is like she gets out there and she finds like a third option, because the world is not black and white anymore. There is not just a good and a bad anymore. And there's no right or wrong choices. There's only the choices that we make and the places that those choices take us. And I'm really excited to kind of see how that continues to unfold. But yeah, getting back to, I think, just one of the things that I was mentioning earlier is sort of like the dynamic of race relations, I think, a bit in this episode. And I don't know if this is just like me overanalyzing it or seeing it, like if it's intentionally there, you never know. But like the fact that Ellie had options is kind of like a young white girl, and then her friend didn't as a young black girl. Like she was like, I'm just going to be shoveling shit. And she was like, and you're going to get to be an officer. And she like,
Yep.
she didn't have options. And that also comes full circle at the end when Ellie's blood prevents her from, when they both get attacked by that clicker, that mushroom thing, whatever they're called. Ellie gets bit and her friend gets bit, and her friend's going to die, but Ellie's not, because Ellie's got that like special blood in her. Right.
Mhm.
And so there's a bit of like, I don't know, kind of like privilege there again, maybe of Ellie gets to kind of survive while in a situation that would kill a person of color. That's just kind of like a dynamic that I started to see. We don't have to like get too deep into that, but that was just something that was kind of popping up for me in that episode a little bit.
No, I think that's a really good point, and that might be, you know, a subtle kind of differentiation that the game developers and the producers, you know, the showrunners decided to put in, where, you know, a lot of times these people don't have the choices. You know, it's, you know, the situation just doesn't allow for it. So seeing that kind of differentiation, especially side by side, can definitely be powerful. Even if, you know, in a lot of cases, the reality is you definitely don't have the choice. So yeah, I think that was a powerful moment.
For sure.
I did want to say also, going back to the choice that you said, and we kind of touched on this a little bit last episode, but Ellie choosing Joel. Again, I don't know if it's the fact that she's younger and maybe she hasn't experienced life as much, but it's really interesting to see the differences between, you know, obviously Ellie has lost people. At this point, we know of what happened with her and Riley. You know, they both got bit. There's that really powerful moment at the end. They don't know what's going to happen. They're basically saying, okay, we're gonna fight this. Let's see what happens. There's the option of the easy way out, or, you know, holding each other and that solution. But you know, that she's lost people is kind of what I'm getting at, and so has Joel. But it's really interesting to see kind of that comparison of, regardless of how much Ellie has lost and experienced, again, in her short lifespan compared to Joel. And again, like we talked about, Joel has lost a daughter. It's really cool to see how Ellie still chooses Joel no matter what. And in the previous episode, we talked about it. Joel had said, okay, you know, I'll go with you, but are you sure you don't want Tommy? She's like, I don't care. I want you. That's it. No question.
Fuck off. Get on the horse.
Exactly. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Joel,
you're my dad.
Joel takes the completely different approach. He says, like, that his loss actually weakens him. It scares him. And that growth that we talked about is really powerful, of him kind of becoming that father figure to Ellie. But again, it scares him because he knows what loss is. Whereas for Ellie, it empowers her. So that's something that's really powerful to see, and really makes her, to me, seem older than she really is.
Yeah, and that's a macro theme, I think, that's coming out across the whole series, is this idea that it's not what it's like you're gonna face loss in life, no matter who you are, no matter what your life experience is. Like loss is gonna happen eventually in some form, and it's gonna be brutal. It's about how you bounce back from that. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head, right? With Joel kind of being traumatized by his loss, and it's, you know, Ellie's never been a parent. So like
Yep.
we can't compare traumas here. Like we can't say like, oh, like, you know, Ellie lost her family that she barely knew versus Joel, who like lost his daughter who he was like raising, you know what I mean? Like watched her get murdered in front of, like, it's different trauma. But oh my God, sorry, my lights just turned off. But yeah, no, it's definitely like yeah, not to compare traumas or whatever, but it is I think a strong thing of like you can sort of come back from that stuff, and there is a way out in the end. Hold on, I'm gonna like go ahead and talk. I'm just gonna like adjust my lights for a second.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah, honestly, I mean, not much else to add about that. Um, I think the moment that really the really powerful moment at the end of episode 7 was when they panned, because obviously they're going from uh, a few weeks ago, however long that was, when the whole situation with Ellie and Riley happened, back to Ellie holding Joel. Um, she's basically right back where with that whole situation, and she's basically, you feel her saying, "I'm not about to lose anyone else. Like, I will fight for this. I will keep this man alive. Don't leave me." All these things that we kind of heard her say in the previous episode, but now it's just the reality is setting in that this is life or death. This is actually life or death.
Yeah, and you know, Ellie plays tough, but when she finds somebody who's her person, that's a recurring thing that she says, "Don't go." You know what I mean? She says that to Riley, she says that to Joel. Um, and it's really interesting too, I think, sort of towards the end of that episode, the way that we see Ellie deal with sort of the knowledge that like it's game over because she got bit and she doesn't quite know yet that she's got that blood that's going to keep her alive. But there's this really striking scene where you see her friend just kind of sitting on the ground like chill as a cucumber, and Ellie's just taking a baseball bat to all the glass in the room and just like fucking shit up, and she's like,
Yep.
I think you forgot like something over there, right? There's that sort of that like violent outburst, and there's almost this kind of like animalistic or um what's the word, like instinctive thing within Ellie of of fighting brutally to preserve life, fighting brutally to like continue on and to create more options, which comes kind of full circle, I think,
Yeah.
as we see in the episode. But yeah, on I think a lighter note too, one of the things that I thought was super fun about this was just like the quintessential teenage experience, but like in the post-apocalypse. You got gym class, you know, if you're a private school kid, you got roommates. And then there's like the trip to the mall. And
Yeah.
it's just like all of these things that like I think we kind of take for granted. And then Ellie's just like, whoa, the stairs move. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like a different teenage experience.
Well, and I think we're at the age now where, you'll get content curated to you about like back in my day, and then there's all this shit about the commercials we used to watch, or how we had those big Macs, the colorful ones that had XYZ software on them, and all sorts of things. And I think that was kind of that nod of nostalgia, where it's things that we experienced, but also in a world where, you see it with kids all the time. Oh, I didn't know what a corded phone was, or something, a landline, something like that. But she's experiencing it not because she's too young. I mean, part of it is, but also because all that stuff existed in a post-apocalyptic world. But I really enjoyed the overall setting of this episode. They did a great job, but I think it was just because they were able to capture that level of normalcy that we kind of talked about before. It was a little different. Obviously, it's just, it's just them, but they captured the overall feeling and theme of the mall experience. You're looking around, you're doing some window shopping, you're going to, I know you wanted to talk about the arcade a little bit, and that great experience, but Riley had actually curated an entire experience for Ellie, so you can definitely feel the love there. But it again goes to show that there is a level of normalcy that you can experience even when you're in the middle of a freaking Fedra camp, and there's all these rules of you can't be out after dark, and people are watching you and all that, but you're just having a great experience. So that was
Yeah.
cool.
And Ellie got her first kiss, which I thought was cute too, of
Yeah.
just bringing that teenage experience full circle. Yeah. The Mortal Kombat thing, I'm like, is there a symbol in that? Because she actually, this isn't the first episode where Mortal Kombat has come up. So there was an episode, I think it was like the first or second episode when we first meet her, and she's talking about what was it? One of the characters who like chews a motherfucker up and spits out their bones
Yeah.
is like a reference that she makes in one of the earlier episodes, and then we see the kind of the backstory of like how she learns about that Mortal Kombat character. But it was also really cool about how at the beginning of this episode, um, Ellie is reading the cheat sheet for Mortal Kombat, and like it's like that magazine. Do you remember those like what was it, the gamer guides we used to get like
PC Gamer,
whenever,
I think, was one.
yeah,
Yeah,
PC
like,
Gamer,
yeah,
yeah, where it was like when a new game came out, it was like the Grand Theft Auto, like the you have to get the Grand Theft Auto edition, and the last page that have all the cheat codes or whatever
yeah.
to like make your car fly or whatever the fuck. And yeah, she had that like magazine at the beginning
Yeah.
of the episode, and she was reading it, and then she finally actually gets to go and play it, which I thought was
Well,
interesting. But
there's a
yeah,
lot of
go ahead.
origin stuff too, because again, the pun book shows up too. So you look in and you see why this stuff means so much to Ellie. You know, she's played Mortal Kombat before. She had this fantastic experience. Then she gets this pun book that she and Riley are able to connect over and laugh over. And again, you see that later on um, in the timeline, but earlier on in the series, where she and Joel are able to connect over that as well. So there's these moments that mean a lot to her, that you start to see where they came from and why it was such a big deal to her.
Yeah, and yeah, no, and when you look at it kind of on a macro scale, because it is a story told out of order, but when you look at it, I think back on like my teenage years too, of like um I don't know, not like a pun book, but like, you know, you would have something that like your parents wouldn't quite get. You know, there's always the teenage thing that parents don't quite understand, whether it's the slang or it's like AIM or it's like I guess nowadays it's like memes and stuff like that, where it's just like parents don't quite get it. But when they finally do start to catch on, they start to like, I don't know, chuckle a little bit. And there's something to the fact that like Ellie and her friend maybe, you know, discover this pun book together, and it's like their little teenage thing. And then she kind of introduces her dad, Joel, to that in an earlier episode, but later in her
Yep.
life, where it's just like, oh, like let me introduce you to like my pun book, and like it's almost like new for Joel in a weird way. Like, I mean, he's much older. He's like probably
Yeah.
heard a million puns in his life, but the show plays it off almost as if like puns are like a new thing to him.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know.
It's a good moment. It's nice.
Yeah, no, it's fun for sure. I'm trying to think. Is there anything else on that episode we want to touch on before we move on to tonight's episode?
Um, I think one thing that I kind of take for granted is the kind of what a lot of, whether it's like movies, shows, games, is the idea of kind of slowing down the pace, slowing down the setting. And this episode really made me appreciate kind of the slow parts, because you know, in a show like this, everyone's like, oh, action, action, let's see people killing people, people killing zombies, infected. um you know, my dad and I were talking about this, and he's like, man, why is it so slow? And he's actually played the game as well. He's actually played the second one too. But um I think I appreciated it a little bit, because you start to take in a little bit more of those granular details. Um and it makes you appreciate when the things get tough, and when things get crazy. So just, you know, main point on that is I appreciated the slowdown, because there's been a lot of crazy stuff that's happened in the past few episodes, and episode 6 was pretty slow too, but there was a lot to take in. So I think that was nice to slow it down.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I sometimes say to like Amanda or whatever when we go to a movie, and you like have to pee halfway through. You're like, when's the best time to go pee? I don't know. I don't want to miss a moment of the movie.
Yeah.
I always say it's during the action scenes, because the action scenes don't really move the plot forward. Not necessarily. Sometimes they can, but like I've noticed that for me like I always kind of gravitate towards those slower moments. And I feel like because that's where the world building happens, that's where the story moves forward. And that's where all the important stuff happens. And it's like, you know, I feel like so many shows like The Walking Dead got real boring for a minute for a lot of people. because they relied too heavily on the action moment and the build up to that action moment, where it was like you could miss an entire episode and not miss anything. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because it was just there for like gore and action and that's fun. You know what I mean? But like it doesn't move anything forward.
Yeah. And
Um,
honestly, the other thing about that is it's all intentional. Like, I'm not a producer, I'm not a director, obviously. I don't have experience with it, but um, just a little side note, when I was working under this guy, he's a DJ. I just went and kind of shadowed him a few times. He was a DJ in Georgetown, and he had told me, a lot of the times you want to play songs to hype up the crowd as a DJ, and then you also want to kind of play slower songs to bring them down, give them a rest, and ultimately bring them to the bar to make them spend money. Because that's the ultimate goal. You want to have them spend money and all that stuff. So everything's intentional. Even if you think, oh, this sucks, like there's always a purpose to it, is what I'm starting to understand here. So like I said, I mean, I appreciate the slow moments, and it makes me appreciate the kind of intense fighting scenes as well, because it kind of gets the adrenaline pumping. And then once I'm ready to kind of slow down, that's when I take in more of that granular information that's actually probably, like you said, more important to the story than these big fighting scenes that everyone gets so hyped up about. So
yeah, for sure. And one of those details that we got to kind of see in this episode that we would not get to see in the other episode was like the shit that people didn't loot at the mall, right?
yeah,
There was when they walk in and it's like everybody stole the fucking Victoria's Secret thongs, or what was it, the sneakers or whatever,
yep.
but like nobody bothered with the soap. And like Ellie is like, why wouldn't people want soap? She's like, I've got sneakers. Like what I need is soap.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be clean. So it's just funny, kind of seeing those little moments.
Yeah.
All right, now let's get into episode 8. Hot off the presses here. I was just like, my first reaction is like, damn, Joel. Like, holy fuck, bro. I mean, I get it as a father. I do, because I'm like, I would be a complete fucking animal for my daughter if I needed to be. But I also like that, like, Ellie, like, Joel commits some brutal fucking like murder to those two dudes, and like you see kind of that murderer Joel come out a little bit. But this was like Ellie's episode, and like Ellie was the hero of her own story a little bit in this one.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, first thought coming out of that, I was like, holy fuck. Like I get like just that was because that's the only thing that happened with Joel was just like that murder scene where he kills those two dudes. But I was just like, fuck, man, like I get it. I would do the same thing. Kill motherfuckers in cold blood for fucking with you and your family, for sure. But the pedo priest stereotype, cliche, I don't know.
100%, dude. You have him. I had him picked out, or right from the beginning. I'm like, this guy seems a little shady. I don't know. I think that's definitely something warranted to talk about. I don't come from a very religious background. I think you had said that you kind of do. So I think it's really, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like I was raised in like a Catholic family, but I'm an atheist.
Okay. Yeah, I think what stuck out to me really is kind of what he said too, is, and Ellie asked him flat out, she's like, it's kind of weird that you found God after all this happened. Like, what's that about? I don't know. I guess the weird part for me is just how much these kind of stereotypical cult leaders really just pretend that they're leading from God's example, or by God's example, and saying, oh, he spoke to me, he told me to do this, like I'm his I'm carrying out his will. So you definitely feel that. And again, it is a little stereotypical. I think he made for a pretty good antagonist, but it wasn't anything that we haven't seen before.
Yeah. Well, when I meant the cliche, the stereotype is like the pedophile priest.
That too. Yeah.
That whole thing, but we won't linger on that because I don't want to start a riot. But you're getting. I had the same exact thoughts when I watched this episode and I watched this guy's dynamic. At first, I was like, "Oh, this dude like might actually be like a chill dude. Like, you know, because usually the people who I would say are God fearing or godly people tend to be like the nicest people and like the best people and like kind of, you know, are very welcoming people. This motherfucker was like a twisted version of that, right? He was very disarming in that, but what you're touching on is that cult leader personality of I'm leading by divine right. If you question me, you're questioning God, that kind of stuff.
Well, and
Um,
also just to touch on that too, maybe that's what makes him such a good villain. It's the same reason that we fear little girls in horror movies. They're so anti, you
mm,
know, they're just against what we had imagined as scary or evil or whatever, that when we're faced with this, it's so, it has to be like something on a completely different level. So as you're saying, if it's someone who's typically God fearing, you know, should be a man for the people, you know, he calls everyone his family, like I am your father, and then you see him act this way, that kind of, you know, that means, oh shit, this guy's actually really fucking bad, like he's
yeah, yeah, and we'll get into some of those things, but that's what you're right. Like that's what makes the best horror movies is when you take something that's familiar or comfortable and you flip it on its head, you make it terrifying.
mm,
That is like the secret ingredient to making a good horror flick or a good villain in this type of scene. Um, I mean, you think about like Freddy Krueger, right? What if your nightmares were real? Or I don't know, what's another one like fucking um oh god, what was that one? Shit, I don't know. It doesn't matter because it's not about. That's not what this episode's about. But you get my point. Is like you take the normal, you take the safe, you take the familiar, and you make it terrifying, and that creates a really compelling thing. But I think he was more than that, even in this episode, right? Because he almost had a justification in his mind for his way of being. But some of the things, the smaller moments that throughout the episode, like blink and you miss it type things, um, actually tell you a lot about this guy's character as it goes on. I think a big one that was very obvious was the way that he treated that girl when her father died. He's like, I'm your daddy now, and like slaps her and is like, shut the
yeah,
fuck up. There's like patriarchy there. But then there was another thing I noticed is when everybody's eating, they're all getting like scraps and they're like, and
yeah,
he
his
gets this
plate is
big pot.
huge.
His
Yep.
plate is fucking huge, and that's not an accident. Like that I think is telling you more about this character and what drives him, and um, I think a little bit more about like the role that he sees for himself in his own community. Is like he's not the leader of the community, he's the god of the community, and he
Mhm.
comes from an atheist background, and he when he talks about the way that he found God, it's never like God saved me. It's that quote at the beginning that's right here on this video, right? It's when we are in need, he shall provide. But he assumes the role of he,
Mhm.
and he assumes the role of the provider. And so he uses this idea of God that he knows other people have, and he manipulates them. And he uses that to kind of like take control of a situation, and he's not good in control. He's not a good leader at all. He kills his
Right.
people and he
Eats
feeds them
them.
to his people,
Yeah.
and he abuses children, and his last words were I like the fight. I'm like, that is so fucking telling about this human piece of garbage.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, he shall provide is definitely a great way to end it, but it's like at what cost? Because they don't know what they're eating, they don't know what's going on. But again, he will provide, but he won't tell you how much, all that stuff. So I think we don't have to get into history or anything, you know, too deep. But if you look back, there's never, people don't just do things for nobility's sake typically, you know, especially as a greater um you know community, and maybe that's changed kind of, I'd like to think that it's changed throughout the centuries. But if you look at the crusades, you know, they tried to spread religion, but what was the kind of ultimate goal? It wasn't just to say, okay, let's spread Christianity for the sake of improving these people's lives, because I don't know if I'd say objectively, but you can't. At least I don't think that everyone's lives were improved by this. So again, we kind of see that generalization with him, but He sees himself as the provider, but it's relative, because if you ask the people in his community,
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, like, it's the people in his community, again, kind of like unawares of the situation that they are actually in, and and the fact that they're fucking consuming human bodies. um I don't know. You're right. Like, it's not. I don't think it's an indictment on religion necessarily. I think it's more an indictment on how people with nefarious, like, motives could use religion and in a manipulative way, um, and the violence that can bring. Because I mean, one of the things that I think is central to his teachings as a priest, is that justice is violence and that love is violence as well. Because he when he talks to Ellie about love and what love looks like, he's like, it's violence. And when it comes to justice, it's not like the only person he shows mercy to is Ellie, because he's a fucking creep. Like, it's not because he's like being benevolent. He is being a human piece of shit, and he's trying to kidnap this girl and groom her and like turn her into like his bride or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just kind of like, and she asked him at the beginning, "Are you a cult leader?" And he's like, "Yeah, kind of. Yeah, pretty much." Like, he doesn't like even deny it. He's like, "Yeah, I like the idea of being a cult leader."
Well, and the other thing is, he says, "Oh, I never wanted this. They chose me." Like, I don't know, maybe that's
Bullshit.
true, but even if it is true, there is some sort of descendants into evil. And okay, let's say he is being truthful in that sense. One of my favorite movies, I've probably seen it like 5 or 6 times, is Batman: The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
And that quote, I may be butchering it, but um, it basically says, like, either you die the hero, or
Yeah.
you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. This guy has, taken on this role of a powerful figure, a leader in this community. And maybe even if he was chosen at first and he was this God-fearing father, preacher, preaching for um, the success of the community, the safety of these individuals. At this point now, he's descended into something that is more primal, more evil, and you can see it in his actions, his words, how he treats people. And again, he's become the villain. He's lived long enough to see himself become that villain. Where initially, maybe, like I would have liked to think, he started off with pure intentions. So it's difficult. It's difficult
Yeah.
to stay that pure.
Yeah. The absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think that could be where, I don't think we'll ever get the answer to that, but
he's dead now. Can't ask
yeah,
him.
and I don't think we need an episode on backstory for him. But I think, he symbolizes a lot of things to me thematically. One being like abusive power, and having that power, especially like sort of allowing you in sort of a patriarchal sense to get away with abuse towards other people, especially abuse towards women, which is like, that is not sugar coated. Like, that's shown um, very intensely in multiple moments. But one thing that I think might have been a bit more subtle is the dynamic. So he calls himself father, and Ellie sees Joel as her dad. And what he does is he takes these girls who have kind of lost their father and like tries to assume the role of daddy, essentially. Um, but it's this interesting thing where you kind of see the split between how, like, maybe not just abusive of religion and abusive cults, but also like abusive parenting, and sort of that dynamic as well. And it's in contrast to the way Joel is, where he is violent, but not towards the people he loves. He's violent for the sake of the people that he loves, but this man will kill the people that he loves to support the people that he loves. If that makes, like, he'll kill his own people for the sake of his own people.
Yeah.
And Joel and Ellie, when he was like, "What? And let them starve?" Ellie was like, "Yeah, let them fucking starve before you force them to eat human meat." I think that is just very, I don't know, it's a very powerful kind of juxtaposition there of, you kind of see an example of Joel's parenting being very, like I said, violent for sure. Like there's a shared violence in both of them, but violence towards outsiders versus violence towards insiders
Yeah.
and like
Well,
members of the group.
and I think the diction that you see in this episode is very important too, because you can feel exactly that word choice. Just how, I guess his name's David, the cult leader. He just, the words that he chooses, even how he speaks to that young girl in the beginning of the episode and how he hits her. But the I'm sure you heard it as well. At the end, he calls, when he holds Ellie, that's a powerful moment, but he calls her baby girl. To me, that's something that you would definitely call your daughter, someone that you truly, truly love. And I think that was very intentional. Again, showing that massive contrast between, one father and another. So
Yeah, for sure. The contrast of the parenting styles, that hit me real hard because that's what I call my daughter. I call her baby girl. I also call
yeah,
her Booger, because she used to be a really snotty little kid, and I would just call her Booger all the time. And now, but yeah, baby girl is the other one. Um, but there was something else that I was thinking of. Oh, Ellie is like so on her own. She's like the hero of her own journey in this episode.
I was
And
gonna.
I really loved that for her because it was you know, there's sort of a microcosm in the relationship that you have with a parent. Of a parent raises you, a parent nurtures you, and then you kind of go off on your own, and then you nurture your parent. And when they reach kind of older age, and that's done very concisely, I think, in this episode, right? Or at least over the arc of the last three episodes, where you see Joel taking care of Ellie, and then when like the shit hits the fan, Ellie turns around and takes care of Joel. And then now she has to find a way to do that without Joel. She has to find a way to survive. And this is a really good, I think, proving ground for her of, can she do it? And the answer is absolutely yes. There's never been a doubt in my mind, but seeing the way that she'd react to the violence and the evil in the world masquerading as good, I think is really important. Because I personally, and you know where the story is going, I don't, but I personally have a theory that like fireflies are like not all that they're cracked up to be. And so having Ellie realize that there is sort of like a, you know, evil pretending to be good in the world, and don't trust everything and don't trust everyone, but also don't lose your humanity in the process, is a very nuanced learning that you don't really have in your teenage years that Ellie is getting exposed to. That's something that you kind of learn in your mid 20s, early 30s, is like, I don't know, like there's good and there's evil and there's a spectrum, and there's people who are evil who think they're good, and there's people, yeah, I don't know, that's one of those things. And seeing the way that she interacts with that world, because Ellie gets exposed to a lot of trauma this episode. She's almost she is uh she's forced to fend for herself for food. She gets into several like altercations like of physical violence, and then there is that moment where she's almost sexually assaulted by him at the very end, and then she commits murder. Like there's a lot of shit that happens to Ellie in a very short period of time, and she kind of has to like process all that shit at a young age. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with that thought, but it was just it's really interesting to have this proving ground episode, I think, for her to see what she's capable of.
Well, you just said a lot of stuff, man, and I'm probably gonna forget all my thoughts because that was some good stuff right there. So,
Shit, sorry.
no, I didn't want to cut you off because it was really informative. I guess the first thing I wanted to kind of respond to is what you said about Joel, and it's for him. He's not a bad person, obviously, but there's you learn from him that, and again in this episode it's reiterated, it's not black and white. Like he is willing to commit murder for the people he loves. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Again, it's not black and white. He will save the people he loves. He will do anything he can to save them, even if it means doing things that are atrocities. The other thing is Ellie has never been the you know child damsel in distress. From the beginning, like the first scene, she's like dropping F-bombs and saying all this stuff. Like, she is powerful. She's resistant. She fights back. You understand that. Like, she's already said she's killed things before. I can't remember if she's actually killed a person or if it was just the infected in that episode that we saw, episode 7. But if this is if David is the first actual living person that she's killed, that makes it all the more powerful. And we see that growth again in how powerful she can be, how resistant she can be. This is 100% her episode. We've seen it throughout the whole series that she's able to fend for herself. She's able to fight back. She's able to talk back, do whatever, but this is again 100% on her. She has to fend for herself. She's scared. She's never done it before. She even says it. She's like, I can't do this by myself. Joel, I need you. But yet she is able to do what she needs to do to keep Joel alive, to keep herself alive, and to survive. I don't know, man. I just really like the what we see from her as a character. And I knew it was coming, but just the way that it was portrayed was really powerful. One of my favorite parts in this episode was when, after she's broken the guy's finger, David, they come in, they grab her, and she's like, no, wait. I'm infected, right? In this moment, I'm thinking, she's like, please. I'm thinking, yo, she is like scared. She's nervous. Like, she doesn't want to get killed. But then I think about it, I'm like, she told them this because she's like, yeah, if you eat me, you're gonna get fucked. So just
I had the same thought.
Yeah, I was like, that is powerful stuff, man. She's being faced with like certain death, and she's just like, hey, pull up my sleeve, take a look at what I got under here. Dare you to eat me.
Well, but I see. I thought that's where I was going to go too, but then it was like, and I bit that motherfucker. I'm infected, and I bit
exactly.
him.
Yeah,
and we already saw throughout the episode that David's people are not 100% loyal to him. They're loyal to him to a degree, but when he's not looking, they're willing to fuck. Because there's that moment they were like, just fucking shoot her, dude. And he was like, all right, and they were about to, and then David walked up, and they like stopped. And so his people aren't fully loyal to him. And she, I think, being exposed to that moment personally, she knew that she could get this guy to turn on David if this guy thought that David's run was over. You know what I mean? And so she's like, David's now infected because I'm infected and I bit him.
Yeah, that was a powerful moment, man. But again, it kind of solidified her as a strong character, able to survive without Joel. Obviously, still feels like she needs him around, but this was 100% her. And she did it. Yeah, I mean, she killed David. She's obviously distressed. Joel is there for her, and she feels that, but she did it 100% on her own. Like, there was no intervention. There was no save the damsel in distress. No, oh, I'm gonna get killed. Like, Joel jumping out of nowhere and stabbing the guy. Like, 100% her. So
yeah. And it's a lesson in parenting too, right? Because you can't always be there to fight your kids' battles. But you give them the tools to survive and to do it on their own. They'll come back to you eventually, maybe not the same, but like dad's arm's always a safe place.
Yep.
And that's,
and they'll be there for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And she doesn't need Joel, but she wants Joel. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of where we're at between him and Ellie now, is that the dynamic is not necessarily one of, I mean, sure, it's like a mutual symbiotic relationship where Joel provides value to her, she provides value to Joel, whatever. But deeper than that, it's like we're seeing love form between the two of them. Not like a romantic love, but like a father-daughter love. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's so, I cannot wait to see like what comes next for them. But yeah, it is it's the kind of love that we did not see between any other characters in this commune.
I think that it's definitely exciting to see. And again, touching back on what we really started to see in the last episode that you and I did, going from that transactionary kind of relationship that they had of you are cargo to now you're way more than that.
Your baby girl.
Your baby girl, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been really powerful. So, yeah, I had a question for you. I don't know if you were ready to move on.
I had a question for you.
Okay.
Do you have your question for me written down so that because I
Yeah,
don't want
yeah,
to
go
ask you a
ahead.
question then you
No, no,
lose
no.
your thought. Okay, because I don't want to do that again. I ramble sometimes. So my question for you was, and you don't have to talk about this. We can move on, but I just knowing you and your personal experiences with not quite fatherhood, but I guess stepping into that role in your past. Um, eh, I didn't know if that colored your kind of take on this situation at all, because I see Ellie going from this like, oh, like, you are like, I don't know you're someone else's kid, whatever, to like, you're my kid pretty much. I don't know if that, like, you want to make any comments on that or not.
It's it's a difficult thing, man, but there's always love for it. Over time, you feel, obviously, with a child that's not yours, it doesn't have to, you can be an uncle, older brother, whatever it is, like you feel this protector, you want to be the protector, you want to feel them succeed, you want to see them grow. So I definitely empathize with Joel in that way. But it's a growth, because you don't know, like, you're stepping into this role of someone who doesn't necessarily know what their role is. And over time, you empathize, you invest in this individual, this child. So yeah, I definitely see a lot of that, and it's a relationship that's always growing. Um, when you're not, it's not from day one. Obviously, you're stepping in to this child's life. Could be, at year 1, 5, 15, 20, doesn't matter. You know, you're you're not stepping in at the ground floor, but you're still building that relationship, and it's something that continues to grow over time. So yeah, definitely empathize with that.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't want to like throw your personal experience out there, but I thought
No,
it was.
man. Yeah.
Yeah. And for those watching who don't know, Mark has played sort of a dad role in his life, not, with a kid of his own, but stepping into that role in relationships.
Yeah.
Okay. You had a question for me.
I did. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to, you know, our kind of personas on this discussion here is, what was your overall experience, with these last few episodes, and overall with the series? Like, how do you feel? Because I guess what I'm trying to understand is, how do you stand versus what's going on in my head right now?
So I don't know what's going on in your head, so I can't compare it, but I can tell
Yeah.
you what's going on in mine. Okay. So it feels like so I'm happy that I was able to come into the show with, like, I think it was like 5 episodes had already aired. So I was able to binge a little bit and get more of that first half very quickly. And it all kind of told a fluid story. Um, I think one thing, I can't remember if I spoke with you about this over text or if I was talking to Amanda about this while we were watching the show, but the experience that I'm getting is like, I actually, I think we talked about this in the last episode. The episodic format of the content is really compelling because there's an overarching narrative. It's a pickup drop off, right? It's like a take kid from point A to point B, but like along the way, there's these little vignettes, and they take up an entire episode. Um, and it is, each episode has a self-contained story that feeds the overarching kind of road story that they're on. So I really like that format of show. I feel like there are shows that do that, but not like as well, because it gives each moment in the story room to be its own story and to have its own message. And like each episode has something new. It's not like Game of Thrones where it's like it ends with a cliffhanger and then it picks up where the cliffhanger left off and it tells one continuous story that doesn't have these smaller, I mean, they have smaller moments throughout them, but they're not these like self-contained stories that could be in an entire movie on their own. So I really appreciate that. Now, in terms of, I guess I'm wondering like what you're looking for in that question. But if I were to guess, you're kind of like, when you ask like what's my take on the show, um, is like, do I think it's good? Is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah. How do you feel about it? Yeah.
Very
I mean,
broad question.
from a guy who does a lot of movies and series reviews and all that, you can definitely see some uh, I guess similarities in terms of like plot structures and stuff like that. And it doesn't have to be from a purely I guess like that thematical perspective, but
Okay, yeah. So I mean, I think the overarching story, we touched on a little bit on the last episode, and I haven't really changed my perspective much on it, but like, what does The Last of Us mean?
Mhm.
And I think it's when you take away all of the things that we think life is and the world is, like what's left and what is there to protect. um and what like why do we continue to go forward, like why do we continue to fucking exist? It maybe, I mean, in some esoteric way, is like, what's the meaning of life, what's the meaning of humanity? And I think good shows, good movies, try to answer that in their own ways, and we see all the things that it's not so far. But very slowly we see the one thing that it is between Joel and Ellie. And the meaning of life, that I'm sort of seeing kind of come through the deeper meaning of the show, um, is that, like, we exist purely to continue to move love forward, I think. And as cheesy as that fucking sounds, like, it's the one thing that I think Fedra hasn't figured out. It's the one thing that we'll see if the Fireflies have kind of figured out. And it's the thing that kind of tends to be the downfall, is in all of these villains, is like their loss of humanity, in the face of having normal ripped away from them. um so it's like, what are we when we strip all these things away? And then on another level, it's sort of that the children are the future, um through the metaphor of Ellie being the one with the blood that contains the cure to all these problems, is like our kids are like our last hope. So that's where I'm at with it now, but we'll see kind of where it ends.
yeah, I think one thing I was just thinking about when you were talking is kind of the whole purpose of, I guess, episode 7, when there was that scene where they're running around in the gym, is why is Fedra so invested in these kids? And I think you kind of touched on that just now too. Is if they are the future, you want to shape them in the way that you see fit, right? Like this is why a lot of, even like, I don't know, companies like software companies, they'll prefer new hires because they're able to shape them into what they want as employees. So these are these young kids that are impressionable. They're young. They don't really know what the world is like. um, a militant organization like Fedra can use them and say, okay, this is the evil in the world. Fireflies, Raiders, other people. We are the last. We are the last hope, and we will kind of shape this. So there's a lot of relativity there of whose perspective do you really see. But again, um, that the kind of trip and experience that Joel and Ellie are on are very separate from that, because they have experienced all these um separate factions, I guess, and they're able to make their own unbiased opinion about what is the right path. Where does humanity really lie? Is it with the Fireflies? Is it with Fedra? Even freaking David said it in the episode here. Like he was praising the infected or the cordyceps, because he was saying, oh, this is natural, it's they're living organisms that are connected. So his perspective is, maybe they're not so bad. Maybe we want to, whose perspective is right? Where is humanity really? Maybe these infected are actually where we want to get to. Maybe they're just happy and chilling. So
Yeah. And yeah, how do I put this? As you're talking about it, I'm kind of like, yeah, you're seeing all of the things of like what not to be, with, because they're all bad guys, but the bad guys are not simple. The bad guys in this show do not consider themselves bad guys, except for maybe, who was it? The woman, who took back
uh
Kathleen, was it?
I think that, yeah, I think Kathleen. Yep.
Yeah, she self-proclaimed like, oh, I'm a bad person,
Yeah.
and like,
Not like my
and
brother.
I'm gonna own it. Yeah, I'm not a good person like my brother. Sorry about it. um but other than her, I mean, all these people are doing what they think is right, even though it is egregiously wrong. um and so, but at the end of the day, like, these people have also, like, you have to keep in mind the context of the show is it's 20 years after the apocalypse. Like, David has made this shit work for 20 years. Like,
Yeah.
he's made it work, even if it's wrong, even if it's vile, it has still worked. And so what is right? And I think that's the path that we all kind of go on in life, is like, we experience a lot of things that we would consider like mistakes throughout our lives, and like, we do a lot of the things the wrong way. But we keep going, and we keep finding a way to like adapt. So yeah, interesting insight there.
Yeah. It's a matter
And
of
when you were
perspective.
talking about the sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's a matter of perspective. Everyone's going to think they're right, and that's okay. Well,
Yeah.
in most cases, it's okay, unless you're
And
doing
when you were
egregious things.
Yeah, when you were talking about the software companies that like to hire new people because they're moldable, malleable, and you can turn them into the thing that you want, you're seeing that through the role that like someone like Fedra plays.
Mhm.
Just being in a managerial position in my own career, and having been in one where I've had like direct reports for the last 3 jobs or whatever that I've had. Um, I feel like who I was as a person who would like, so when we were in college together, I was president of my fraternity, and like who I was then, and my idea of leadership and what it takes to kind of convert somebody into the thing that you want them to be is so dramatically different than it is now. I mean, I feel like what I've learned is like, back in those days, you almost like try to enforce a way of being onto people so that they become the thing that you need them to be, so that they can do the job that you want. But I found over the years that if you just treat people like fucking humans, and prioritize their humanity for them, and say things like, hey, turn off your computer, like, you're getting the day off today or whatever, like, or get, or like, do nice things like, I get you're really stressed out right now, or you haven't, like, you've been online for the last, you had a 60-hour week last week, like, go spend time with your kids, I'll take care of this. Like, just having a little bit of human empathy, I think, goes a long way, because then people will kind of turn around and say, okay, you're prioritizing me, so I'm going to prioritize like this job, like when I'm here for it. You know what I mean? Or I'm going to prioritize like our shared goals, like when I show up. Um, is sort of the thing that I've landed on, because I've been, I think, in a role of leading the way Fedra would lead, and I'm now in sort of this position of like, if you treat people like people, and you care about the human that is there, and you just recognize the fact that like life is not work, life is not just about goals and objectives, life is also just about experience. When you prioritize that for people, I think they surprise you. They surprise you with how much they show up for the thing that you need them to do from like a goal setting objective standpoint.
Yep. Yeah, and I think even from a purely kind of feasibility perspective, um, you know, I guess it benefits everyone. I'm not saying that there's kind of these hidden reasons for doing this, but if you have happy employees, like you said, or if you have happy individuals in a community, they will in turn reward you with performance. They'll do what it takes. They'll be happier to do what it takes to build up a community, a company, whatever it may be, because happy individuals perform better.
Yeah, if they feel cared about, they will put care into the team. They'll put
Yep.
care into like the work that they do. And so yeah, people, that I guess the insight there is that people will surprise you when you treat them like people. And I think that that's something that this show is starting, like, I'm interested in seeing if the show explores that, because so far we haven't seen all of these leaders of these different communities that have been antagonists have not set that example.
Yep.
They've been enforcers. They haven't been empaths, And so I don't know. I'm curious to see if this show goes in a more positive direction, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't really touch on the game at all. So
Oh yeah, let's do it. Hit it.
I have a few thoughts on that. So before I say anything, I guess about the game and the differentiation there, I will say the adaptation it's been great. I felt everything's been very compelling. I think like the environment, um, all the scenes, everything has been great. Um, However, I think maybe it was episode 7. It started to hit me how similar everything has been. And I guess the thing that really sticks with me, and I don't know, maybe some of that initial spark kind of wore off for me, and maybe it was the deja vu experience, or um, I don't know. Let's just say we'll have to acknowledge our own biases here, right? Like, I've experienced this before. I've experienced it with the game, and we've kind of already identified that the game is very similar, um, story wise, almost identical to the series. Um, I can't unplay the game. I can't experience these experiences. So I'm going in with that bias already. Um, I think what I started to identify, like I was starting to say, is my perspective has started to change, because um it's so similar. Like, the whole episode 7 was taken pretty much from the game. A lot of the experience of them playing the video games, them riding the horse, the merry-go-round, everything was kind of just taken straight from it, including dialogue, everything. So to me, I don't know. I started to wonder, what's the audience for the series? Is it supposed to be a love story to the game and to the people who have experienced the game, as another medium for them to experience it, another outlet? Or is it for another separate audience of people who aren't gamers, for people who see this as a fantastic story for what it really is? It's a fantastic story. And this is, again, kind of why I was asking you what your experience was, from the series so far. It's because objectively, objectively between the two of us, it's been a great story. It's very compelling. It's been excellent so far, but it's pretty much like a copy and paste in many parts from the game that I've seen so far. So again, am I supposed to feel what you feel? Is it for people that aren't gamers? Because that's kind of what I'm landing on. It's so good that they wanted other people that aren't gamers to experience it. So maybe I'm not supposed to experience it. Like, I don't know. That's just what I'm trying to think through. And I can give examples for kind of, why I think that, what parts really drove me to that. But I don't know. It started to wear off for me. And I was like, man, I've seen this before. Like, I wish I could take that part out, at least for a second, and just kind of push it to the side and say, wow, like this was compelling, which it was, but
Yeah.
not as much the second time.
Right. Yeah. Because you know where it's gonna go. Yeah. First thing I'll fucking say is this is why I don't read books anymore, because every book that you read becomes a show or a movie, and you're like, oh, like I read that book, and then you watch the movie or your show, and you're like, I was the same as the fucking book. Like, so the last time that happened to me was The Martian. I feel like maybe it has happened since. Oh, Dune. But no, I didn't feel that way with Dune, because Denis Villeneuve did a really masterful job with that movie. And I've read the first 2 books, which the first book is obviously going to be 2 movies, and then the second book is going to apparently be like a TV show on HBO Max. But yeah, with the last time I felt that way was with The Martian, with what was his name? I am so like foggy in the head right now. Matt Damon.
Yep.
So I read the book, and then they were like, "Oh, we're making a movie," and I was like, "Sick." The movie was like literally the book. Just the book was like the only difference between the book and the movie was that the book went way more into the science because you've got pages like to fill. You know what I mean? It's not built for the book isn't built for a 2-hour runtime. The book is a book, and so he explains from like a botanical like a granular botanical science standpoint, like why the potatoes grow in this shit inside of the humid like tent that he built.
Actual shit, right? I mean,
Right.
he was
Yeah.
using it
Yeah.
as fertilizer. Yeah. Oh, I read the
Yeah.
book. It was
No.
fantastic.
Oh yeah, you read the book. Cool. So you get it. Like it goes way deep into it. Um, and the movie is like pretty much the fucking same, except it doesn't go into the boring details. On the last video, someone had a similar point here. Is like, here's my analysis. I have the comment open right now. It's Rusty Shackelford. Here's my analysis. The game is better, and the idea of a TV adaptation is almost as insulting as ruining its perfect ending with the existence of a direct sequel. So I think that is like what the gamer crowd is probably thinking to some degree. I have friends who have played the game who are watching the show and they're like, it's still so good. Like it doesn't ruin it. But for me, I'm like, I'm just really happy that I have the game to look forward to because there's a video game that we're both playing that we are texting about, and I'm on my second playthrough right now, and I know exactly where the story is going, and I'm still excited to play it. And so that's why I'm really happy that I get to experience the show first and then play the game because like gameplay is still fun even if you know where the story is going. Like you still have the game part of it
Well,
to look forward to.
and there's also something to be said about it being more compelling because you're physically controlling this individual. You're playing as them. You're in a way much more invested because that's an extension of you. You know, you're controlling them, you're controlling their movements. You are a part of the story in a way that you might not necessarily be in the series. So yeah, I mean it's definitely a perspective I was thinking of, and that comment makes a lot of sense. I don't know when it really hit me, but it must have been. I think I was starting to feel this way, but episode 7, I really was like, man, this is just the same thing. But I don't think I'm not necessarily supposed to enjoy it, and I do still enjoy it. It's just that you know, the second time around, some of that magic that you may be feeling um, starts to wear off, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I would say I watch it. It doesn't. It feels like any other like really really good show that you watch where you don't know where it's going to go. Like Game of Thrones, if you hadn't read the books, which is another one. My brother read the books. I didn't. He was pissed. I was like, I'm having a great time. I don't like it sucks for you. Um, but yeah, no. I mean, I totally get it. I think yeah, thinking about it, right? If I were to try to like empathize and put myself a bit into your shoes, I don't think like I think it's look at the ways in which the show is different and try to sort of appreciate those things. Like the whole of episode 3, we were talking about this in the last episode, right? Between Bill and not Ted, um,
uh,
Bill and
Frank,
Frank.
yeah,
Yeah, Bill and Frank, and the whole dynamic there, and we were talking like that's not in the game,
yep.
right? Yeah, so like there's so much still that the show has to offer, and so that's why I think when these adaptations happen, you know, when you see a one-for-one adaptation, it's a cash grab. But when you see an adaptation that makes subtle changes or leaves certain details out and emphasizes others, it's the creator of the show is trying to tell you like this is the part of the story I care about. A good example is biopics. There's the biopic formula of like, you know, the childhood event that like made them who they are, and then there's the montage, and then they become famous, but then they deal with some kind of struggle, and then they overcome it, and this is the person that we know and love. Um, but then you look at movies like Martin Scorsese, where he does a biopic, like The Aviator or Wolf of Wall Street, and it's just not that. Like it's not. It is heightened reality, and he focuses more on certain aspects that I think tell us a more succinct and focused message than what the source material would suggest about like the human condition. So maybe there's a bit of that to kind of dial into. But it's hard to do that on episodes where it's like everything is lifted from the game and nothing is excluded or added to.
Yeah. And I mean, to be clear, the story in the game is just so fantastic that they didn't really need to take any creative liberties to make it a good story. You know, obviously they did a lot, but if you take the story for what it is in the game and then just lift and shift it straight into a series, it's still powerful. Now I will say, I was trying to like go back and remember. So the way it's kind of separated out is I played Last of Us on PlayStation 4, and it came with it was like the remastered version edition, and it came with DLC, which was I'm trying to remember, see if I have it written down somewhere what it's called. But basically, it takes place in that portion where Joel is injured, and I think it also goes back and has that scene where with Ellie and Riley. But that moment, I guess it came out, I want to say like maybe 2014, 2015. But again, it was you can't go back into that time frame because that was a different time. You know, it wasn't that long ago, but it was still like, you know, it was almost 10 years ago at this point. And that moment, specifically the kiss that you're talking about, we were talking about it earlier. That was it won like best moment or something like that. Like it was a very powerful moment in the game. And I think I remember seeing somewhere like in an article it said like it was a breakthrough moment in gaming. You know, this is 2015-ish time frame. This hasn't really been done that much. You know, you fast forward to now, you know, you see gay, lesbian characters a lot. But especially in gaming, this wasn't really a common thing. So it was like, again, much more powerful to see it back then, and in a game as well. So I think moments like that can't necessarily be recreated at this point. But again, even a one-to-one adaptation, like you were saying, is still very powerful, especially for a new audience. And it's obviously widely appreciated. It's just maybe not the same for a gamer that's experienced.
So right. So okay, so here's where maybe I can add a little bit of color of being not having that gaming experience with this title in particular. I look at the kiss between Ellie and Riley and I'm like, oh, like cool. You know what I mean? Like it's like you've seen it a million times. It's a kiss. It's normalized. It's not like they don't make it like a whole like holy shit moment. I feel like the thing that you feel in that moment is like more that it's Ellie's first kiss, not that it's like, you know, a moment for you know, the queer community.
Mm-hmm.
But I did feel that in episode 3, and that wasn't in the game, right? So I think there may have been sort of maybe some sort of meta textual understanding of the media that you're in on the part of the show's creators, who maybe understood exactly what you're talking about, that this moment of a kiss between two women that was so huge in 2015, you know, we've moved past that now as a society. We're almost a decade later, and that is it, you know, it's not as big of a moment, not because it's not important, but because like we have as a society become way more tolerant, and way more like welcoming of that kind of stuff, where you see it frequently and it's not weird. It's not like a, oh, bravo, clap your hands moment. It's this is a part of life. And you know, like gay people and queer people and lesbians, and like it's all just, it's normal. Whereas I feel like with the episode 3, it did a really good job of not just being like token representation or tokenism, but actually creating sort of an environment that I think a lot of people on who are anti-gay might see themselves in a character like Bill, and to take that character, turn him gay, but do it in a really thoughtful, compelling, meaningful way. I think that has like that would win a moment. That's a significant thing in culture to do. So I would say almost like they've taken that moment that would have been with Ellie and Riley, and they've moved that moment over to Bill without taking that moment away from Ellie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think you can see that you know the showrunners are capable of creating these powerful moments. And I liked what you said about personifying Will or Bill as this not the token queer character, seeing him as someone that others can relate to that might not necessarily have before. um, so they created a powerful episode. I just wish maybe there was a little bit more of that in there. But again, you're taking this template, this blueprint of a fantastic and compelling story. You don't have to do that much to it, especially if you're trying to reach a new audience. Because you know that the people that have already played the game, they're going to tune in regardless because they're loyal fans and they know how good and compelling the story already is. So at the very least, they're going to be curious of like, how does this compare? Just like me, even if I hate it, I'm still curious to see where is it going to go in the future. How does it compare to something that's already incredible? Are they going to make it better? Is it going to be the same exact thing? Am I going to be disappointed either way? Probably not. I'll still tune in. So I'm not the target audience, maybe because they know they already got me.
I think, did you watch Cowboy Bebop growing up?
A lot of my friends did. I didn't know.
Okay. Did you watch the new Netflix series Cowboy Bebop?
No.
Okay, they did a live action. So there's the anime, and then there's a live action. And I grew up on the anime, and I watched the live action. And I have a friend, Josh, who did the exact same thing. Like, we both watched it as kids on Toonami, and then Netflix came out, and we were like, Cowboy Bebop, we got to watch it. And we had two very different takes, even though we both had the same kind of, like, we knew the source material, but we had different takes on the show. I really liked the live action remake. They changed quite a few things. They created more of a girl power moment in the show than may have existed in the source material. But it was done, I think, pretty tactfully and pretty well. And I really enjoyed a lot of the changes that they made from the source material. They weren't necessary. You had a great source material to build off of. You didn't have to change much. But the things that they did change, I feel like it didn't add to the source material. It just made it different, in a way that was not any less good. So that is kind of the way I think I try to approach media. That is, like, Harry Potter, for example, The Martian, we talked about it, like, just all of these different things. It's like, what are you taking away and what are you adding? And why are you making those choices? Okay, now let me try to analyze the show or the media that I'm watching based purely on the merits of that, and not trying to compare it to the source material. And that is a struggle, especially when you're so acutely aware of it. But I think that's like the way that I try to approach these things.
Yeah, and I don't want to continue to beat a dead horse here, but I think it is difficult. Um, but if it's the same, is it okay? Like, does it still make it a good work of art? And I'd say the answer is still yes. I mean, even if my experience may be different from yours, I can still enjoy it in different ways. And that's okay. So,
and what's the money making reason behind it? I mean, we can't just sit here and pretend this is all art for art's sake, right? Like, this is entertainment. This is a money maker. Like, HBO is doing this to make money, and there's some kind of title association with Sony. Like, what's the monetary end game of this? Is it that HBO needs a new hit show to stay relevant, and this one's already pre-baked, so they don't have to hire writers and all like to the same degree that they would have before? Like, it's like when Netflix bought Arrested Development. It's like, you already have a built-in fan base, turn it into a show. Now you have more reason to make money. Sometimes it's as soulless as that, but I don't see that in this show. I don't see soullessness. I see a lot of care and a lot of love.
Yeah, I mean, it's a labor of love, I think, and they did it very, very tactfully. And I think as a gamer, as someone who's experienced, I think that they were very faithful to it, which is good to see. I mean, it could have been a lot worse. We talk about these adaptations all the time where it really is a cash grab. And it's just to see, okay, it's got this name associated with it. At the very least, I'm going to get someone just because that's all it is. I mean, you see it in the reverse. If you look at all sorts of shows, whether it's like, Disney shows or movies. We talked about Harry Potter earlier. There's all those Harry Potter games. Like they made them because the name is associated with it. You just build a game, takes a couple months. I'm downplaying it. Obviously, it's not that quick, but
Yeah.
you create a simple story. It could be the exact same story from the movies, series, whatever, or it's something completely different. And then you just throw it out there and someone's bound to buy it. You didn't put that much time and effort into it and you're done. Or you can really just create something separate. Now, we won't get into it, but like we were talking about with Harry Potter, Hogwarts Legacy, like it or hate it, it's what everyone's talking about. It's what everyone's playing, and it's because, or a lot of people, I guess, because it's got that name associated. But for them, it was a labor of love. So you can definitely see that in what they've created.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I think I touched on it. I can't remember if it was my Matrix video or my Ghostbusters Afterlife video, but there was something where I kind of talked about, like, I think it was the Matrix Resurrections, where what happens with these companies is they take IP and then they turn it into, because it already has a built-in fan base. Nobody's going to lose their job over recommending making a new iteration of an IP that already has an established fan base, right? It's a safe bet from a production standpoint. Is like, hey, we're going to make this movie and we're at least going to make our money back because we know that there's, 500,000, 100,000 people who are going to go to the movies and watch it. And like, that's what we need to make our money back. So we're going to do it. And like, nobody is going to be like, oh, you pitched this, in the film industry, producer is not going to, or an executive producer is not going to yell at an EP and be like, you're fired, you fucked up, you bet big on this dumb, stupid little plot thing that was like a big risk and we lost all this money on it, so you're fired now. No one's going to lose their job over that. So I think there is an inherent safety net to revisiting something that already has a fan base. And that's why the changes that you make to it are so important, because that is how you're moving not just the story, but like the relationship that people have with that IP forward. And the relationship that people have like with this game is changing because of the show. And there's some people who are fucking pissed about it. They're like, you fucked up a perfectly good thing. Why'd you ruin it? And there's other people who are like, well, hold on, you still have the game. You like Star Wars. Did you see the sequel trilogy?
Not yet, but we'll have to talk about that separately. I know, man. Yeah.
We'll talk about it separate, but it is contentious because people are like, you ruined my childhood. And I'm like, did you not enjoy your childhood like when you had Star Wars as it was? There's a lot of changes that people make that aren't always received well, but I think that like you can also just ignore that piece of it.
Yeah, that's true. You got to take risks, or even kind of continuing a story, or as we saw with Last of Us, if you create that adaptation and take the safe path, it's still a risk. It's just, you got to calculate it. And yeah, from our perspective, you just got to enjoy it and experience it. So
for sure. All right. Well, next week, unless there's anything else you want to talk about, I figured I'm just
good,
close
man.
it out.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I'm exhausted and I feel so sick. My head feels like I'm in a dream. But yeah, next week we're going to be doing the finale. So maybe we'll give it like a day so we can like sit on some things and like process it and like really put some thoughts together. Cause I have some feelings about the, what is it? The way that they show like the scenes from the next episode. There's a couple moments that are meant to look like Ellie's talking to Joel. And I'm like, Ellie is talking to somebody new. And I want to know who that person is. So I'm excited to see where that goes. But we will save that for next week.
Sounds good. Yeah. I'm excited.
All right. Cool. Ending broadcast now very abruptly.
Nice.